Welcome, everybody, to the Catholic Professionals Podcast. My name is Andrew Jacoby, and I am blessed to be joined today by Maggie Feduccia. Maggie, thank you so much
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm looking forward to hearing about your work. Maggie works for the Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Nashville as a care assistant. So I'm very curious to hear about that and about what your work history has been like and how you're integrating your faith into your work, because that's the purpose of our podcast. But before we do, I'll start out with our sponsorship. Today's podcast is sponsored by my company, Good Shepherd Staffing. We help Catholics in developing countries find work that enables them to make a local living wage, as well as the ability to work from home. Because in a lot of developing countries, in order to make a living, people leave the provinces in, let's say, a place like the Philippines, and they have to either go to Manila or they have to leave the country, which really hurts their ability to both form and maintain family relationships. So that's the goal, is we find them work that they can do from home. And if you've never worked with a remote virtual assistant, we start off with a 10-hour free trial, so you can try it out, see what it's like. We will pay the people, so they are not working for free. We are paying them. And then if you want to move forward, an entry-level virtual assistant is under $1,000 a month full-time. And then other roles are also available, but the prices will vary based upon experience and skill level. So if that sounds of interest to you, please do go to goodshepherdstaffing.com, reach out, and we'd be happy to work with you. Great. Maggie, so tell us, could you give us a little bit of background about yourself, maybe a little bit about your faith journey, and a little bit about your work journey as well, and as they relate?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a cradle Catholic, and very much so in that my father was considering priesthood and was in seminary, and then discerned that he would like to have a family, left the priesthood and met my mother, and through being in a parish together. So that's very much the way that I grew up and the way that I was informed. And growing up, I always felt happiest and I always felt my best when I was serving in some capacity. I know one thing that really sticks out with me is I always did the nursery from like late elementary school to middle school. That was always my thing. But really, I always enjoyed doing service in some mentorship kind of role. And so as I grew up, I really was considering different careers. And for a long time, I was considering being a teacher and then being an actress. And I actually got my undergrad in theater, which is surprising to a lot of people. But so I have that background. But I really discerned that I wanted to make an impact. And while, yes, I think that theater is a great avenue to do that, I wanted to do more direct service, which led me to social work. Well, which led me to my job at Catholic Charities, and then led me to social work. So I've been working at Catholic Charities, the Diocese of Nashville, for about 2.5 years now. I work in the New Americans program, in our refugee youth program. So what that is an after-school program and summer program for refugee youth. And in that program, we go over several things such as socio-emotional learning, informal English classes, math and science, and help the children adjust to some of the harsh experiences that they may have had in their home countries as they integrate into Nashville Public School. And so, a part of my work that I've started doing recently is working more with the socio-emotional learning classes. And this coming year, we're going to start opening that up to the caregivers and providing some of those services. So I think that I could go on and on about the way that I see Christ in my work. But I think that I always say that the two places that I've experienced the most hospitality are a Benedictine monastery and a Congolese home. Because the minute that I walk in, It's like food is in front of you. The babies are crawling all over you. Like, everyone is so welcoming to you in that environment. And I think that that's a hospitality that's not seen in America. And I think about how these people welcome me as Christ. And that's what we're called to do. And so not only did the people that I work with encourage me in my faith, but I also see Christ in them and learn so much from them as well.
And have you always worked in, did you have jobs before that were not in a faith-based organization, or is this the only place that you've worked is in a diocese or in a faith-based organization?
I'd say officially, in high school, I was very active in my diocese and I was very active in my youth group. So I've been functioning in that sort of a role for a while, but this is my first official position with the diocese. However, I have served as a camp counselor and a mentor in some capacity, but this is my first, and I was a server for a while, but this is probably like my first, like, I guess, quote unquote, real job, as some would call it.
Yeah. So were you tempted by, I'm sure there were other ways of making a living, maybe as you went to school, or you saw your friends doing other things. Were you ever tempted by sort of other paths as a professional to start out your career, or was it very clear to you that this is where the Lord was calling you to serve, and there never was, well, gosh, if I could just be an accountant or a graphic designer or something else?
I knew from probably very early on that I would not do well in an office job. That I just know myself, and I know that is not what would be good for me. And so and when I first went to college, I wanted to be an actress. And I'm really blessed that I had parents that really encouraged that. And their idea is a bachelor's degree opens so many doors. And if you want to go into theater, like, that's amazing and you can pursue that art. But I feel as though I'm really, like I said, I was blessed that I had parents that encouraged me to go where my passion was and go where I felt fulfilled. And even when I wanted to be an actor, the reason that I wanted to be an actor was because I think that stories are so vital and so important because of that connection and the sense that they bring people together and they help people realize that their experiences are not unique to them, and to a greater extent that they're not alone. And so I think that isolation is something that I've been aware of and something that I've wanted to combat, and that's always something that has been on my mind. However, I think that after working at Catholic Charities, I think I really found my niche. I'd say I've always been like, just interested in other cultures and other countries, other ways of life. And so I think that in experiencing that with working with my clients, as well as that aspect of doing something fulfilling, but within that reciprocal relationship has definitely aided. So yes, I'd say that for a long time there's been this desire for service, but I'm very blessed that I found my niche for it, if that makes sense.
And do you still plan on doing some acting on the side, or as a just an avocation, even though it's not going to be your main career?
I'll tell you what, I use it all the time with my students. I think that drama can be extremely healing, especially for children. And I think that creativity and engaging in that is something that a lot of children don't get to do nowadays. And it's very good for development. So just in working with my students, I use it every day. But also, I think that just in practical ways, like, I'm very good at leading a group. I can project my voice. I really do use it I use it all the time. And I think I even see it taking place when I have events with the young adult group at my parish, just like things that I'm able to take initiative with. That's because of my theater experience. So I don't think that I will act on the side really, but I definitely use those skills regularly.
Has working for the church changed your opinion of the church in some ways that you found striking or interesting, or are there things that are different than what you would have expected before you got this job?
I will say that something that I did not know is that the church is the greatest provider of aid internationally. Like financially, the Catholic Church pays for the majority of the I think non NGOs as well as other organizations, which is something that I think is something to be proud of, definitely. But I've also seen some adverse reactions, definitely, to the work that I'm doing within some of the people in my church, even though or not my church specifically, but within the church, even though it is an organization. So I will say that I'm very proud of the fact that the church does contribute that much, but I've also been taken aback by some of the reactions by people in the church to
What
my
kind of
work.
reactions do people have to the work that you're doing? It seems.
People seem to be very adverse to providing aid for immigrants, such as food stamps and providing aid, securing job opportunities, securing housing. Some people have been very adverse to that, and immigrants receiving those services.
Got it. So people are thinking that they just shouldn't be here,
Yeah,
essentially, in the
essentially,
church.
yes. Yes.
Right. And yet they are. So, like,
Yeah, and they are. And I don't, yeah, and they are. And they're one of the biggest blessings in my life.
what have you learned? It sounds like you had an interesting and really enriching experience at the house of the people that you mentioned before. Are there any other anecdotes that you have of things or people that you work with that have touched you?
Oh goodness. So, oh my goodness. How much time do you have, really? Like I'd say that when I do a lot of house visits, so that experience isn't unique. I that really happens a lot where I my coworkers and I always joke that like the goal is always okay, in and out, we need to get this form signed 20 minutes. And you're there for an hour because everyone wants to welcome you and say hello and take pictures and they want you to eat the food. And I really will say that I do my best to engage as much as I can in their culture. I always say I know a little bit of a lot of languages. Obviously fluent in English, I have that one down, but my Spanish is okay. I know a little bit of Swahili, even less of Kinyarwanda. I know some Pashto, which is like one of the languages in Afghanistan, a little bit of Dari, another one of the languages in Afghanistan. And so even just like them opening the door and me greeting them in their language and introducing myself in their language, just the appreciation, like, oh, literally it makes me tear up just because I feel like it's such a small gesture that they don't, that means a lot to them because they don't receive it, even though it's something that I feel is very easy. But I think just their appreciation of the knowledge that my attempt of knowledge of their culture is something that I feel like, and just like that reciprocal relationship as well. Just, yes, I am providing them like with these services. So there is that boundary of like, I would not consider these people like my friends, they are my clients, but there's also that reciprocal relationship of you have all of this knowledge of your story and your background that I do not, that you're imparting on me. And so just that wisdom, I think is so beautiful.
Is there anything else that the people, your clients, have taught you that you think would be useful for other people to know in your community, like the way that they interact with you, or just anything in general?
Yeah, I would say that I'd say there's a hesitancy to engage with immigrant communities and new American communities just because it is difficult. There is that language barrier, and a lot of times there is that power dynamic. But I think that a cultural, like a greater cultural welcoming, I think can only be I think that that can only be good. I think that engaging with other cultures is extremely beneficial. I think that it increases your overall global awareness. I think that in interacting with those that are unlike you, that fosters empathy and compassion and conversation. And so I think that I would encourage people within my community to engage more with immigrant communities. I know, for example, something I do is rather than going to like the supermarket chain, I will go to a halal butcher, which is like a traditional Islamic butcher, and because I know that the meat is prepared in a way that makes it so halal is similar to kosher, where the meat has to be a certain standard in order for it to be served. And so in doing that, I know that I'm supporting a local business. I know that I'm supporting an immigrant business, and I know that I am getting very good quality food as well. And the price is comparable or cheaper. So just being conscious of little things like that and that engagement, I think, are just little things that people don't really think about, that are ways that you can definitely engage with that community and also probably learn something as well.
Have you ever in your life, you said you were cradle Catholic and your father and mother were quite religious all the way.
Yeah.
Was there ever a period in your development where you questioned the faith, or maybe thought that there was well, just sort of like, yeah, we sort of went away from it in any way? Either, yeah, let's leave it at that.
I would say that probably like my first crisis of faith, I was very young. I say very young. I was about 14, and I think my family, we had a cross country move. And so I think that that really shook me. And so, when you're 14, your whole world is crashing down. So I was like, we moved across the country. God isn't real. And then I think that that was definitely, I mean, as most 14-year-olds go through, I think that that was really a phase. And I think since then, I have always identified as Catholic. There have been times that that has been more, that I've practiced more than others. I'd say that it's definitely like has fluctuated in the past, but I really do think within like since I'd say really since like I went to school in COVID, so I think that there's like I can definitely see like a difference like post COVID and like kind of things looking up, and I feel like that's really when I like I said, I always identified as Catholic, but that's when I really wanted to get more serious and more intentional about my faith. So it's definitely been a journey, and like I said, more times that I've found myself hesitant. But I've looked at, just in researching, just looked at other faiths, because I think it's interesting to, it's number one, it's interesting, but it's good to challenge what other faiths believe versus us. And I found so much that relates, and so much of like, wow, this spirituality and this traditional religion like applies very, I can see a lot of parallels in this specific spirituality and Catholicism. So I think that there have definitely been times that I've had to research and do the work, as I think a lot of cradle Catholics who kind of have grown up Catholic and then like really committed to it, a lot of them do. So like, yeah, that's a very long way to answer, but so like, yes, there have been times, but
But you just always felt drawn back. You never
Yes,
really.
and I think that I'm very grateful that my parents always, like, they very much instilled this sense of charity within me, and I'd say my siblings as well, but my parents very much connected faith and charity and faith and service, and how the face, like, you see the face of Christ in those that are most marginalized, and that we are called to go to those people and be in relationship with them. And so that has very much been a part of the faith, which even when I was, I don't know, just joining college and being, a silly 18-year-old girl, I think that even then that was a value, even though if I didn't, like, completely align with the church, service and advocating for those who are marginalized has always been something that I'm passionate about. And that being really the foundation of my faith has been something that has been grounding throughout my journey, definitely.
And do you have what is your vision for your career? Do you have that? Are you in a place where you're saying, "Hey, the Lord has me here. This is kind of where I see myself for the foreseeable future," or are there other things that are pulling on you, like, "Hey, it would be awesome to do this," or "I'd like to go, get this kind of education," or
Hmm.
how are you with kind of here in the future?
Yeah, so currently I'm in my master's program. I'm currently earning my master's in social work. So, and I am set to graduate in the spring of 2026. And so after that, social work school is very fun. So that once you have your master's, then it's 2 years, about 2 years of practice. It's X amount of hours, I can't remember off the top of my head, before you can be licensed. And so I would love to pursue licensure, but I know that not for a while I am single and don't have a family, I would really like to work in East Africa, Central Eastern Africa. I'm actually going there next summer for 3 months. I'm going to it's Lewa, Kenya. It's a pretty rural village in Western Kenya. So I'll be working in an orphanage and school there as a socio-emotional learning instructor, as well as a case manager for the students in the orphanage. So I've really felt connected to a lot of my clients are Congolese, and I've really felt very connected to them, and learning a little bit of Swahili, which is what is also spoken in Kenya. So really, I think that this summer will be a good time to really discern where the Lord is calling me. And if that's in Kenya, then that's beautiful. And if that's in the States, that's also wonderful. But I do know that after I graduate, I do want to pursue licensure. Where I want to do that, that's a good question. But
Yeah, the Lord is really working in the African continent, on the African continent. There's so many on fire Catholics
yeah,
in
definitely.
Africa. It puts us to shame in a way. And
Well, it's
here
so
in the
well, and just
States,
I think culturally the worship style is so different, and I think that there's when you go to an African service, you really have, I feel like you have a lot more freedom of movement that you maybe would in an American Catholic church. And I think that really is one of the beautiful things about Vatican II, for example, is after that you see, I really do think that that is a result of Vatican II and that cultural implementation of the liturgy, and seeing how that combines with the local teachings, I think is a beautiful. I think the continent of Africa and certain parts in there are a beautiful example of that happening.
Yeah, there it's interesting because we went, or let's say Westerners went to Africa to evangelize them at one point. Although a lot of early Christians were Africans.
Hmm.
I think it was Augustine was Algerian.
Hmm.
So, but now the Africans are coming to us to re-evangelize us. Maybe it's interesting.
Well, and it's interesting just because I graduated from a non-denominational Christian university, and
What was
somebody
it
was
called?
talking. Sorry?
What was it called?
Belmont University. It's in Nashville. And so we took Bible classes from an academic, non denominational perspective. And somebody was talking about Christianity being a specifically white religion. And I talked about how the majority of Christians were either African or Middle Eastern, probably until the about half of the church's history. And I think that that's why it's so important to show Augustine of Hippo accurately as a black man, to show Jesus as a Middle Eastern man and Mary as a Middle Eastern woman, just because Christianity is so much more global than we think it is. And by only showing people that look European, I think that it's very exclusionary to every for at the detriment of everyone.
100%.
And I think that it excludes that history from the Middle East and the continent of and Northern Africa as well.
Yeah, that's true. They certainly have a lot to teach us at the moment, given the differential in seriousness of the faith. I think there was like 80 million Africans going to Mass on a weekly basis, is more than in the United States and Europe combined.
Yeah.
So they're really on fire. So when we get here kind of sad about the fact that the faith is, people are leaving the church at high numbers. They're also coming to the church in high numbers in the places where there is also the most babies being born. So
Yeah.
in the place where the replacement birth rates is one of the only places in the world where the cultures are replacing themselves, because we here in the West are not. So
Yeah, it's very interesting to see, and it's interesting to see how the I'm curious to see how that'll look in the future, those global trends, and how that'll impact just the faith internationally.
yeah, I have a question. So and then we can end in a prayer. I wonder if you have any advice. I know you don't have a vast amount of professional experience as you're a young woman, but you have some experience and you deal with a lot of people. And I wonder if somebody is listening to this and they are struggling with combining or thinking through how to be a faithful Catholic in their profession. Would you have anything to say to them in terms of words of encouragement?
Yes, for sure. I think, yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think the biggest thing would be finding what fulfills you, because what fulfills you and if that is truly good and holy, Christ is in that and God is in that. And I think for me, I'm very blessed that I'm able to integrate my faith and my work with what I'm doing. But I think that that there are so many different ways. There's so many different ways that you can do that. For example, I have three younger siblings, and we're a year and a half apart. So they're seniors in college. One is a opera voice major. One is a documentary and film journalism major, and the other is a civil engineer. And even though they all have such different careers, they found what fulfills them, and they are living out their vocation in a way that is holy with what they're doing. And so I think that within our culture, there's really an emphasis on what's going to make the most money, what's going to make you the most successful, but I think really is what's going to what ignites your soul. I think is what, and because whatever that is, there's something holy in that, and there's God in that. And sometimes you have to dig a little bit, but I will say that I do believe that it is there.
Amen. Thank you. So Maggie,
Yeah.
would you feel comfortable? And again, thank you so much for taking the time to share with
Yeah,
us
thank you
today
so much
about
for having me.
your vocation and your passion for the people that you work with, and your service to the Lord and His church. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And I wondered if you might be willing to end us in a prayer of your choice.
Yeah. I'm looking it up because I want to get the wording exactly right. So just you wait for a moment. But are
Sure,
you
take
familiar
your
with the
time.
Divine Mercy Chaplet?
I am, but I couldn't recite it from memory.
Oh, okay. So I had a really I've had a devotion to it for a long time. So this is an excerpt from that. Okay. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless, and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us, and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
That's beautiful. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Maggie. I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you.